Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I have for you 5 true paranormal stories, and also I am sharing again my creative process for today's thumbnail with a speed drawing. I just want to inform my patrons that their video is ready and up on my Patreon page, so you can go ahead and watch it there. But for now guys, grab your flashlight and follow me into the darkness. My father always made sure me and my brothers were close growing up. Despite being a couple years apart, we all did the same sports, played the same games, went to the same school, and had each other's backs. Even as young as I was, I always appreciated my father's diligence in building that bond between us. I didn't realize there was clear motivation behind it until the day he sat me down to talk about his own story of growing up with his only other brother. He wanted to wait until I was old enough, and after everything I learned, I appreciated him more for it. Your Uncle Jack was a troubled soul, Dad led off with. He was smaller than the average kid, and everyone let him know it. There was no holding back when we were growing up. You took shit, or you let it get to you, and brought more on yourself. Jack always acted like he could take it, but I suppose I just ignored the signs myself. When we were teenagers, Jack fell in with what I guess you'd call the wrong crowd. Those kids that dressed in all black and listened to the music that made your grandmother have a migraine for weeks. We were polar opposites really, and I had no desire to understand what he did with his time. We didn't talk much. Things changed when summer started in 1986. We were fresh out of junior year and had the best year of our lives to look forward to. While I spent my days at the beach, Jack was with his little crew, doing God knows what in the woods north of town. One evening I was getting ready to go out when I saw him dipping out ahead for me. He seemed like he was in a hurry to go, and had his hands full with a really big book and some cheap candles that looked like they came from our mother's room. Thinking nothing of it, I locked the door behind us, got in my car, and took off. Son, I don't remember what I did that night. The hours before Jack came home are lost to time, or maybe just too insignificant to recall. Jack came to my room and shook me awake. He told me he did something really stupid and he didn't know what he was going to do. I remember waiting to shove him out and make him wait till morning, but the tremor in his voice had me concerned enough to hear what he had to say. Jack went into the deepest part of the woods that night, with his creepy crowd in tow. They planned on smoking and listening to heavy shit while cursing their family and the shitty life they were stuck in. He brought his big black book and candles out there in the intention of changing his life. He said he was going to summon something, maybe the devil, maybe a guardian angel, who knows. But his friends had talked up all that witchcraft stuff enough to make him think it could change his life forever. So he drew some circles in the dirt, lit the candles, and read that book while his friends looked on and encouraged him. His girlfriend laid with him in the circles, and they writhed around for a while in ecstasy, while the onlookers cackled and chanted. When the candles started to dwindle, Jack said he felt heavy, tired. He was ready to go home. His girlfriend was still excited, wanted to keep going at it. He didn't want to, but she wasn't having it. She got on top of him and kept on with it. Jack laid back and obliged while she used him. He described in detail what he was doing, and to this day it haunts me. His arms were behind his head, letting her to do all the work. His eyes were closed, trying to get into the feeling of it all. And then he was snapped out of everything when she let out a loud yelp. This wasn't a cry of pleasure. It was a pain, and maybe a fear. She got away from him, and when he tried to approach her to ask what's wrong, she brandished at him and told him to stay away from her. The others pulled away from their partying to see what was going on. She was trying to clutch at her back, and she was crying. Her friends ran to her and stood her up, trying to wrap a jacket around her. Just before it draped around her back, Jack saw what had caused her to retreat. 2 long gashes were rimmed across her back. He described the jagged look of her flesh around the marks, like something only a great big beast could have done. They threw things at him, screamed at him, and wouldn't hear a word he had to say. They turned their backs on him and left him in a confused mess in those wards. Jack recounted everything that happened in so much detail, it took me what seemed like an eternity to process it all. He had come home and spilled it all to me, the brother that was barely even there for him. I still didn't believe him after that night, after he confessed to all that horror, and I regret that to this day. He didn't sleep much after that night. He always said he couldn't. When I would see him around the house occasionally, his neck looked red and blotchy, like he had been rubbing at it for hours. His nails were practically gone, like he had pulled them off his fingertips himself. His eyes seemed blank, and the dark circles under them were hardly unnoticed. He left the lights on everywhere he went, like he didn't want an inch of the house to be dark. When Mom went into his room late one night, and his light was still on, she found him passed out on his bed. She flicked off the light and closed his door. I'll never forget the scream, the blood-curdling scream that came from the door. Dad rushed in to find him rubbing his neck, and he was yelling, over and over, "Who turned it off? Who the fuck turned it off?" Jack left the next morning. I peeked out of my window as the sun was breaking the horizon, just a backpack slung over his shoulder. As he lumbered into the street, I can still see it when I close my eyes sometimes. As he walked away, I could see his shadow stretch across the lawn, with an identical shadow splitting off in the opposite direction. Dad said he hasn't seen his brother Jack since that day. Dad went on with his life. He met my mom a few years later and started our family. Jack never reached out. I've never met him and rarely heard about him until today. Someday, Dad would tell my younger brothers too, when they're older. I guess I'm sharing this because I'm still trying to process it all. I don't hate Dad for sharing the story. I know he felt he had to, and when I do finally come to terms with it, I can talk to Mom about it, about the scars and her other shadow. I still don't know if it's real. I mean, it sounds crazy. Of course it sounds crazy. I would be writing about it here if I sounded sane talking about it, and you probably won't believe me. Or maybe you'll just shrug it off. But I swear, there's a hand following me. This isn't just my imagination. It can't be, and it's been following me around for a pretty long time. The first time I saw it, I was 5 or 6. My mother told me and my sister good night and left our bedroom with the door open. And there was light in the hallway because my little sister was scared of the dark, and I wasn't about to complain about it. I closed my eyes to sleep that night, but I didn't feel tired. I just tossed and turned around pointlessly in my bed, and at one point I opened my eyes again and my gaze landed on the doorway. There was a hand there. It was just there, peeking out from the side of the door. I thought it was my mom playing some kind of trick or something, so I tried to call her out, without showing that she was scaring me. I had a real fear of witches at the time, and I was secretly afraid that this was one. Then I blinked, and the hand was gone. My mom still came to see what the fuss was about, so I'd really called her. I hadn't dreamt that part. For some reason, I can't remember if I told her about it, but I have the feeling I didn't. Maybe I was ashamed of being scared of something that wasn't real, something I'd imagined. When I was about 10, we'd moved to a different house, and I slept alone. That night, I had a really bad nightmare, and when I woke up, I saw something pressed up against my window. I swear, It had the shape of a hand, but then it just kind of flopped off. When I told my mom about it the next morning, she told me it was probably a bat or something else. A few moments later, I found a handprint on our bathroom mirror when the place was filled up with mist after my sister's shower. I knew I would sound stupid, but I asked her if it was hers, and well, it wasn't. And it was a bit too big to be my mom's. It looked more like a man's hand. I had no idea why a hand would try to leave a handprint on a mirror, but if it's real, then there's probably no real reason. I mean, it's just a fucking hand. It appeared again in a nightmare. Well, I'm not sure if it was a nightmare, or if I was half awake, but I was in my bedroom in that nightmare, and it was exactly the same as my real bedroom, and I heard something scuttle on the ground. My brain decided it had to be a big spider to make so much noise, and I was scared to look over the bed because I hate spiders. But then my brain told me that spiders that size probably did not exist, so I ended up looking. The scuttling stopped at the exact moment I started moving, and I saw the hand. It was half hidden by the darkness of my room, but it was completely still and right next to my bed. I think I wanted to scream, but I didn't. That's why I'm not sure if it was real, because I felt frozen, and when I blinked, it was gone, just like the time I saw it in the doorway when I was little. Until then, I could tell myself it was just some kind of phobia or something. I don't know, a product of my imagination, but something freaky happened this morning. You know that moment when you take a shower and you have to close your eyes to wash your face? Well, I was doing that, and I felt something touch me on my left thigh, and I didn't see anything when I opened my eyes. At first I thought it was the shower hose that had somehow grazed against my skin while I was moving, but it was nowhere close to me. I feel really uncomfortable. Something was in the shower with me and touched me, and I don't know what, and I sure hope it's not what I think it is, because how could that be possible? But I'm fucking creeped out, guys, and honestly, I hope I'm not just being delusional or something, because if I'm not, what if it touched me before, but I was sleeping? How can I be sure it's the first time that it touched me? Why is it following me? Is it real? It's honestly scary, and I don't know what to do. It's been a fairly rough time, but you know, I thought I was getting a handle on it. But this is wrecking my head. It's been a couple of months now since my wife Laura passed away. Myself and our daughter have been working through our grief, and it hasn't been easy. But you know, having photos of the three of us has been a help. I've always been the techie one in the family, and before the accident, I got Laura to set up automatic sharing between us. It's a relatively new feature in Google that does face recognition and automatically shares photos, so I have a copy of all her photos of me, our daughter, and family in my online album. It's been a godsend for us. Also being the techie, I went through the painful process of closing Laura's social media accounts and posting final updates. I think it was part of my coping mechanism to focus on practical things that were within my ability. It held back the darkness, you know. My wife's Google account is closed. I didn't want to be getting a reminder from some automated algorithm like Facebook saying, "You haven't heard from Laura in a while." That's creepy. And my daughter is now at the age where she's starting to use social media. It's something I just don't want to have to deal with. So life moves on. Daughter is back in school. I'm back to work. We're trying to go on with things. It's not easy, but you have no choice. And then a few weeks back, I got a notification saying new photos had been shared. Freaking odd. I checked them out. It's a couple of old photos of us before we were married. I assumed it was just a glitch in the data. The algorithm's picking up archived stuff. I smiled when I saw them and cried in my bed, thinking about them that night. But you just swallow those feelings down and move on. And then a week or two later, another notification. This is where it gets freaky. It was just a single photo of me, asleep in bed. I was a little taken back by it. I checked the settings and I could not access Laura's account anymore. It's locked out and unusable. But there is that photo. When I got home, I checked her mobile phone. Yeah, I kept it. I'm a bit of a technology hoarder. It was powered off and had no charge. The account was a bill account, so it was gone as well. So yeah, I had to put it down to another glitch in the algorithms. Big data is always a little creepy, right? I reasoned out that it must be an old photo. My wife was a bit of insomniac. I'd be feeling asleep at 10 p.m. in the evening, but she wouldn't be able to go to bed until 1 a.m. So one night, she must have taken the photo before she went to bed, and the algorithm is only now working out my face from the photo. The photo is quite dark, so maybe some new filter has been added, and it managed to pick out my face. But that's not all. I got another notification this very morning. This time is a photo of our daughter sleeping in her bed. Must be the same reason, right? The algorithm got better and picked out the faces, but it still creeped me out. Like Laura was sending me photos from beyond the grave. So I checked the settings again. Checked her account, still can get in. Checked her phone, still off. I then got curious and I downloaded the photos. They are both time-stamped the night before the accident. What the fuck? I've submitted feedback. I've emailed Google about it, hoping they'll just turn it off. But I've gotten no response, as you'd expect. I haven't mentioned it to my daughter. Really not worth making her feel upset about it. Still, I feel as if something is off. I don't believe my own logic about updates to the algorithm either. Why would my wife take these photos the night before? It's probably nothing. Just coincidence, right? Here's a Halloween story for you. Nobody dies or gets hurt, and it doesn't answer any big questions. But there's a part that still gives me chills when I remember it, and a part that still makes me mad. It happened when I was 16, back in a distant time we all call the late 80s. My friend Tina had a late October birthday, so when she had her party, it was just a couple days before Halloween. This was not a wild party, it wasn't our style. We were more inclined toward girl talk and movies than a dance floor. And since it was almost Halloween, the movies were scary ones. Long after dark, inspired by one of the movies we watched, we decided to hold a séance. We didn't know much about how a séance worked. So there we were, 7 or 8 girls, sitting in a circle on the floor. We were in a bedroom of Tina's house that was for some reason completely empty. All that was in it was the carpet on the floor and the curtains on the windows. Plenty of room for us to sit in a circle around a big pillar candle on a plate. Someone lit the candle and turned out the lights, and we began. We started by asking the usual silly questions. If Jason likes Angie, flicker. If Lynn, that's me, is going to fail Trig, flicker. If Lisa did it with the entire wrestling team, flicker. Of course, the candle didn't flicker. And not just because I pulled a solid D+ in Trig. We were dumb kids asking dumb questions, and we all knew nothing was going to answer us. But then, something started to happen to the flame. It wasn't flickering, and it didn't seem to be responding to any specific questions. What it was doing was more like bending. Picture a candle flame, burning steadily, pointing straight toward the ceiling. Then picture it leaning over, almost a 90-degree angle, its point oriented more toward the wall than the ceiling. It was not flickering or guttering like a breeze was sending it sideways. It was steady as ever. It would lean over and point, hold the position for several seconds, then slowly went back toward the ceiling. A few seconds later, it would bend sideways again, whether a new question had been asked or not. It was pointing toward me. Well, me and Becky, my friend sitting next to me. Becky was a vocal skeptic and atheist, the type who was always up for a debate about religion. I was fairly religious at the time, wearing the Celtic cross necklace my grandmother gave me. I loved that necklace and wore it all the time, even to bed. I even risked my life for it once, turned my back on a guy with a knife who demanded I give it to him, then got in my car and drove away, shaking so hard I could barely work the gas pedal. After a few minutes, it became impossible to ignore the fact that the candle was not flickering, but pointing, and it kept pointing at two girls with very different religious views. Someone said, if there is a reason the flame keeps pointing at Becky and Lynn, flicker. And for the first time that night, the candle actually flickered. The flame gathered, as if a breeze was blowing past it, but there was no breeze. The windows were closed, and so was the bedroom door. We jumped and shrieked a bit, laughing at the scare we gave ourselves. If it's pointing at Becky because she is atheist, flicker, someone said. Nothing happened. Then. Okay, if it's pointing at Lynn because of the cross she is wearing, flicker. The flame went out. Let me make it clear, nobody blew the candle out. It went out like someone had wet two fingers and pinched it. One instant it was burning brightly, the next it was gone, leaving the room pitch black. Of course, next came a cacophony of screams and giggles, and a tangle of arms and legs as we all tried to get up and get to the light switch at once. With the light on though, the scare was pretty much gone. I was fine. Nothing had hurt me in the dark, and my necklace was still around my neck, and I was maybe a little jumpy for the rest of the night. But hey, overall, it was a pretty damn good scare for a late October night. We went back to the scary movies, and I'm sure everybody but me got over the shocking moment pretty quickly. 2 days later, it was Halloween, and I was putting on my costume to wear to school. I was a hippie in a flowing dress borrowed from my mom and a crown of flowers in my hair. The necklace didn't really go with the look, so I took it off and set it on my dresser. I never saw the necklace again. The next day, when I remembered I had taken it off, I searched high and low, checking behind the dresser and all around it on the floor, rummaging through the drawers and emptying the pockets of my clothes I'd worn that week. 2 years later, my family moved out of that house, and I had to pack up my entire room. I looked at every single item in that room, and the necklace wasn't there. I'm still angry about it. I loved that necklace. I live in a small town in Michigan. It's a quiet town of about 5,000 people with a distant mix of woods, city, and country. Ever since I can remember, I've heard stories about Morrow Road, a road roughly 3 or 4 miles from my house. The legend says, and this is all over the interwebs, a mother loses her baby, kidnapped, wandered away, a few different variations, and dies in the process of searching for her baby. To this very day, she wanders the woods surrounding the road, but more particularly, the legend says she haunts the Morrow Road Bridge. I've known this story growing up, and had been fascinated with it since I heard it. Before I was born, the bridge in question was packed down, and the half of the dirt road it was on paved over. The other half, still dirt, has its own small bridge the newcomers go to for lack of better knowledge. In high school, my friend got his first car. One of our cheapest thrills was going out to Morrow Road. Our first time we tried the traditional park on the bridge, honk your horn 3 times, and put your keys on the roof of the car, and some old bitch comes and rapes your face. Trick that was so popular to the evolution of the story. A couple of weekends with no success, and we decided to try a different spot. We found a clearing. We decided since it was not near a house, and we could park off the road a bit, that we would stay there. Friday night, again, proved nothing, so we packed up and hit the road at about 12:30 a.m. Saturday night, we set off late, and it was roughly 2:30 when we arrived. We sat in our normal spot, listening, waiting, windows down, quiet, looking around. We sat until roughly 3:30, entertaining ourselves with, "Did you hear that? And what was that?" When to our surprise, we hear the unmistakable sound of a baby's cry in the woods, pretty close to the road on the side opposite of the clearing. We were gone. We could not believe what we had heard, and also noted it was 3 a.m. We went back again and again through the week, and we saw or heard virtually nothing out of the ordinary, unless it was between 3 or 4 a.m. We laid off of the road for a year or so. He started college and only came home on the weekends, and I started a full-time job, so our trips were few and far between. A house had begun construction on the site where we liked to sit, and knowing that spot, I began to hear about all the mysterious setbacks the project had suffered, with new construction torn apart the next morning, a water heater explosion, and a couple other incidents I can't remember. The house was finally constructed, and the new family that had built it had moved in, if only for a while. Never did know the family that had moved in, but I do know they were only there for roughly 6 months. By this time, I had a shift change, and I was able to hang out on the weekends as late as I wanted. We started going to Morrow Road again, and we had our system down. We'd leave at 3 a.m., sit at the clearing in front of the abandoned house, and wait. First night out, I had a video camera, and we recorded out of my passenger window, facing the clearing, with night vision on. We had thought we caught nothing until we reviewed the tape at home. What we caught was a shadow, like smoke, blowing into the middle of the frame. Our jaws dropped as it formed into a humanoid figure and stood still, looking at us, and blew away as it had come in. The whole thing took about 5 seconds. My body said to me we're idiots. I looked at him. "Are you watching you saw with the staring?" He said you were breathing on the window. Well, we kind of had a quick laugh until I said, "My window was all the way down." He had the video until a few years ago. His hard drive crashed. Total bummer. But all of our friends had seen it, so no big deal. We had been out to the road about 10 more times, each with very weird things I don't care to explain, like the white noise saying his name as we turned off the road to go home. One of the last times we went was by far the most eventful. It's a regular night as usual. We started off at a mutual crush's house. That bastard. Talking and hanging out with her and her brother. We get to the topic of Morrow Road, and her brother jumps at the chance to go with us. We wait a couple hours until 3. We head out to the spot. As we sit in front of the abandoned house, looking into the clearing, I see a green humanoid blob pacing in front of the house from side to side. Thinking it was my ass adjusting, I didn't say anything until it was said for me. "You guys see the green blob going back and forth?" We both agreed with our eyes fixed on it. We watch for a few more seconds, and the blob starts making its way slowly towards the car. We realize what's happening and start yelling to get the hell out of there. Though we really didn't need it, the driver saw it walking towards us too. Once the car started, the blob started flying towards the car. As we spun the tires and pulled away, the blob caught to what I would say about 10 feet off the car. We all saw a human figure. The blob followed us about 15 feet down the road and disappeared. I watched behind us as it did so. That was one of our last trips to the road, and I'll never doubt the existence of ghosts. Hey there, and thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, and if you like my videos and want to see more, subscribe to my channel. And I will see you all in my next video.